Samantha and Grace had been best friends since childhood, their summers spent exploring the woods surrounding their town. They shared countless memories of laughter, adventure, and the occasional scare, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to encounter. They knew the trails by heart, but one day they decided to venture off the beaten path in search of mushrooms to take back for dinner. The idea seemed innocent enough, a fun way to spend the afternoon and perhaps find some rare fungi to impress their families. The sun was still high in the sky, casting golden beams through the trees, and the air smelled sweet, like pine needles and fresh soil. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, birds chirping and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. The deeper they wandered, the quieter the woods became. The familiar sounds of the forest began to fade, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to swallow their footsteps. The birds stopped singing, and the breeze that had rustled the leaves earlier died away, leaving the air stagnant and thick. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. An hour passed, and Grace glanced at her phone. No service, but worse, it was later than she thought. The realization that they were far from the familiar trails and the safety of their town began to set in. The shadows were longer now, and the forest, once warm and welcoming, felt suffocating. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to ensnare them. "We should head back," Samantha suggested, her voice strained. The unease in her tone was palpable, and Grace nodded in agreement, her own fear mirrored in her eyes. They turned around, but the path had vanished. The forest, which had once been a familiar playground, now felt like a labyrinth designed to trap them. The trees, gnarled and twisted, looked unfamiliar. Each one seemed to have a face, twisted in a silent scream. Their branches contorted into grotesque shapes. Panic bubbled up as they realized they were lost. The forest seemed to shift around them, the trees moving closer, the shadows growing darker. Samantha pulled out a map, but the dense forest around them didn't match any of the markings. It was as if they had stepped into another world, one that defied the logic of their map and their memories. Suddenly, a faint drumming sound echoed through the trees, followed by chanting. The sound was distant at first, barely audible, but it sent a chill down their spines. The sound was rhythmic, deep, and unsettling. It seemed to come from all directions, surrounding them, drawing them deeper into the forest. It wasn't like anything they had ever heard before. The chanting was in a language they couldn't understand, but it was filled with a malevolent energy that made their skin crawl. "Do you hear that?" Grace asked, her face pale. Her voice trembled, and Samantha could see the fear in her eyes. The air grew colder, and the scent of the forest changed. What had been earthy and fresh now smelled like blood, thick, coppery, and oppressive. It was a scent that spoke of violence and death. The oppressive atmosphere weighed down on them, making it hard to breathe. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees pressing closer, their branches like claws. They broke into a run, their footsteps frantic on the forest floor. The drumming followed them, growing louder, more frantic, accompanied by guttural chants in a language that seemed ancient and full of malice. The drumming and chanting seemed to come from everywhere, echoing through the trees, filling the air with a sense of impending doom. It was as if the forest itself was alive, and it was hunting them. As night descended, they found themselves in a clearing, a circle of stone slabs smeared with dark, dried stains. The sight was horrifying, and they knew they had stumbled upon something ancient and evil. Samantha gasped, This isn't right." Her voice was barely a whisper, and Grace could see the terror in her eyes. The chanting reached a fever pitch, and from the trees came figures, silent, their faces obscured by masks made of animal bones, their bodies painted in dark red symbols. They moved with a grace that was both beautiful and terrifying, their eyes hidden behind the masks. They moved with terrifying grace surrounding the girls, cutting off any hope of escape. The figures seemed to glide over the ground, their movements synchronized, their presence overwhelming. The last thing Grace remembered before everything went black was the cold, wet feel of blood running down her arm as one of the figures pressed a knife to her skin. The pain was sharp and immediate, and then there was nothing. The next morning, Samantha stumbled back into town, disoriented and alone, her clothes torn and covered in blood that wasn't her own. Her eyes were vacant, her mind shattered by the horrors she had witnessed. Grace was never found. Have you ever found yourself hopelessly lost in the woods? The feeling of being utterly alone, surrounded by an endless sea of trees with no way out. It's a fear that can consume you, a terror that can drive you to the brink of madness. Beware, stay vigilant, because there are terrifying ancient tribe peoples in the woods that few have ever seen and lived to talk about. These tribes are remnants of a forgotten past, their rituals and beliefs shrouded in mystery and darkness. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. We delve into the unknown, bringing you tales of horror and the supernatural that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Join us on TikTok and YouTube for more bone-chilling chronicles, if you dare. Our journey into the darkness is just beginning, and we invite you to come along for the ride. Who knows what other horrors we will uncover?